Willkommen. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Sean Huggins. This is React with Hugs, and today we have a very, very interesting looking video planned. Check this out. This is 3 Nazi laws that still exist today. Part 2 from Feli from Germany. Check her out, linked in the description as always. We watched part 1 of this series quite some time ago on the channel, but this is part 2. I guess 3 more laws that are still around today that existed from the Nazi regime. So we're just going to hop straight into it. Oh, but by the way, if you haven't already, you can check out my new reaction channel. It's for all things Europe, not just Germany. It's Europe with Hugs. It'll be linked down in the description if you're interested in more reaction content. But anyways, let's waste no more time. Los geht's.
These laws were written by the Nazis, but for some reason, they're still active in Germany to this day.
All right, here we go. This should be good.
Hello, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Feli. I'm originally from Munich, Germany,
Hello.
but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on and off since 2016. A few months ago, I talked about 3 German laws that originated in Nazi Germany, but that are still very much in effect in Germany today. The Mordparagraph, murder paragraph, which is a crucial part of criminal law to this day. Ehegattensplitting, which regulates taxes for married couples, and German Labor Day, which takes place on May 1st. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'll link that up here and down below for you guys.
I'll also link my first reaction to the first part of this down in the description as well.
But there is even more. In total, it's about 30 German laws that are in fact remnants from the Nazi regime. This is going to be a long series. How is that even possible, you ask? Well, when the Third Reich ended after World War II and the US, France, and the UK founded the Federal Republic of Germany in 1949, aka West Germany, there were a lot of changes. The German borders had been readjusted after the war, the country was being denazified, and of course the new state was founded with a brand new constitution and new laws. For the most part, because drafting every single law completely from scratch would have taken a lot of time. So instead, the more practical approach was to simply look at the previously existing laws and adapt them. As long as they aligned with the fundamental principles of the new German state, they could stay. Those fundamental principles are called the Freiheitlich-Demokratische Grundordnung in German, which loosely translates to liberal democratic basic order, meaning that the country is set up as a free and anti-totalitarian political structure. Laws that were clearly violating those principles, such as laws that were discriminatory or were obviously serving the purpose and ideology of the Nazi regime, were fully abolished, of course. But laws that seemed rather apolitical and harmless, that were simply regulating everyday situations, were often just slightly adjusted, rephrased, and carried over into the new German state. And in some cases, laws were even kept the exact same. So today, I want to talk about 3 more German laws that originated in the Nazi regime, but are still in place today. The first one being the church tax. This was the one that you guys brought up the most in the comments last time, and it's a law that's usually pretty shocking for Americans. In most cases, when I mention that we have a church tax in Germany, the first reaction is, oh, Germany taxes their churches? In the US, they're completely tax exempt. Nope, quite the opposite actually. Church tax is a tax that the people pay to the church. So the churches receive money from taxpayers.
Man, I'll tell you what, the churches in America would love that because they make so much money as it is, and none of it is taxed from the government. And then you tax the people, the community, and give that money to the churches on top of all the money they already get. Woo! That would be very popular in America if that was a thing.
But no, they don't usually have to pay any taxes in Germany either. So basically the way it works is that any German resident who is registered as a member of an officially recognized church community, such as the Catholic, Protestant, or Jewish community, has to pay an additional tax every year that residents who aren't church members don't have to pay. The details of how this works vary by state, but in the states of Bavaria and and Baden-Württemberg, the amount you have to pay equals 8% of your income tax. So not of your total income, but of the amount of your income tax.
Okay.
And in the rest of Germany, it's 9%. So for someone making 45,000 euros a year, for example, this would come down to about 500 to 600 euros a year.
Dang.
Now you might be wondering, what makes someone a registered church member? And how does the government even know about it? Does it have to do with how often you go to Mass? Not in the slightest. In fact, many church members in Germany never go to church at all, but they are officially registered as members simply because they were baptized or confirmed when they were younger. Also, in Germany, your denomination is listed in your official registration with the government. If you've seen this video of mine, you probably know that you won't get asked about your race on German forms, which is why it was super weird for me when I had to fill that out here in the US for the first time. But you will get asked about your religion and denomination in Germany. The most common responses for this include evangelisch, so Protestant, römisch-katholisch, Roman Catholic,
römisch-katholisch, that's fun to say,
altkatholisch, Old Catholic, Jüdisch or Israelitisch for Jewish, or of course you can also write down that you belong to another religious community that doesn't charge any additional tax, like Islam, or you can state that you don't belong to any religion at all. And anyone who belongs to the Protestant or Catholic religious community in Germany will automatically be charged church tax, Kirchensteuer. And the Jewish community charges a tax too, but since they don't have churches, it's called Kultussteuer for them, so worship tax. But if you belong to a different denomination or aren't religious at all, you don't have to pay anything beyond your regular taxes. Which is why a lot of Germans these days decide to officially leave the church, as we say.
I wonder if that's part of the reason why the amount of people that are religious in Germany is a lot less than compared to America.
In 2022 alone, it was almost 1 million people from the Protestant and Catholic Church combined who revoked their membership. All it takes is filing a form and paying a fee. Whether or not you're actually religious and still believe in God doesn't matter for this. You can even still go to church after this if you want to. Even though I should mention that church attendance has been continuously going down too in Germany, which is another factor as to why so many Germans have been leaving the church recently. Why pay for something you don't even attend? One of the downsides, however, is that you won't be able to be a godparent anymore for a child's baptism, and church weddings or funerals might get denied for you too. Even though this is usually decided on a case-to-case basis, and especially if your partner is still a church member, weddings are still approved in many cases. But despite so many people leaving the church in the last few years, there are still currently over 20 million people in Germany who are officially members of the Catholic Church and over 18 million Protestant church members, which combined is more than 45% of the German population. So
45% of the population is one of those two, and then 46% has no religion. Wow. 46% no religion. I think that is definitely a lot higher than America, if I had to guess.
The churches collect quite a bit of money every year. In 2023, the Catholic Church made 6.5 billion euros from the church tax, and the Protestant Church made just under 6 billion euros. This makes up for at least 40% of the church's yearly income. Okay, but how is this connected to the Nazis exactly? Now, the concept of church tax had been around long before the Nazis ever came into power, but before Germany became a unified country, this was usually handled individually by the different parishes, monarchs, and landowners. Until the year 1919, when, during the Weimar Republic, Germany's first ever democracy, the church tax was officially established in the constitution. But it was still up to the church organizations to collect the tax. Then, in 1933, the Nazis came into power, and they almost immediately contacted the Vatican to enter a treaty that would regulate the relationship between the German government and the Catholic Church. These types of treaties were called concordats and were quite common at the time. At that point, the Vatican had already made concordats with the governments of Italy, Portugal, and Latvia. And there had been negotiations with the government of the Weimar Republic too, but they never actually came to an agreement. The Nazis resumed these negotiations, which quickly resulted in a treaty called the Reichskonkordat, which was negotiations which...
Dude, I mean, I'm sure the Vatican had no idea what was coming, but still crazy to think about, you know?
quickly resulted in a treaty called the Reichskonkordat, which was signed in July of 1933. Among other things, it guaranteed the Catholic Church the right to collect church tax in Germany and granted them control over their institutions without government interference, which was worth a lot during a time when the Nazi regime had started to suppress church organizations and rigorously followed their process of Gleichschaltung, also known as coordination, where they took control over all aspects of life in Germany. In return, the treaty prohibited the Catholic clergy from participating in any political activities. The concordat also guaranteed similar regulations for other Christian denominations, mainly the Protestant Church. Now, since the Catholic Church and the Nazi Party had been rather critical and hostile towards each other up until this point, the treaty was a way for the Nazis to keep up the appearance of religious tolerance and quell any doubts and mistrust among the Catholic population, which...
Man, so think about all these politics that are going down, but in religion. It's like religious politics. Crazy.
At the time, made up about 40% of all Germans. In hindsight, this treaty was a huge success for the Nazis in terms of foreign policy because it gave the regime a whole new level of legitimacy in the world. Despite the fact that the Nazis started breaching their side of the treaty shortly after signing it, and against their promises, actually continued to suppress church organizations. A year later, in 1934, the Nazis then passed a law that allowed for a church tax to be automatically deducted from a person's wage by their employer, just like their income tax, meaning the church organizations didn't have to collect the tax themselves anymore. That's why denomination was added as a standard category to people's Lohnsteuerkarte, their income tax card, which is basically a document that showed an employee's tax and social security contributions. Even though the Nazis ended this automatic deduction system again after just a few years, it was reestablished after World War II when the church tax regulation was adopted into the Constitution of the new Federal Republic of Germany. You can find it in Grundgesetz Article 140. And despite the fact that the Reichskonkordat from 1933 was originally entered by the Nazi regime, it remains the official treaty between Germany and the Vatican to this day. That being said, the question of how legitimate the church tax is in a secular country like Germany has been subject of public discussions for decades.
Yeah, having a church tax when your country is not super religious seems a bit odd, but if it's written into the Constitution, then like what are you going to do? You know, like it's written into the Constitution. So how do you get around it? I mean, it's not mandatory, thankfully, but still, it's just strange to me that this would be a thing because I don't really understand what the benefits are of taxing people and giving that money to the churches automatically, you know? I mean, I see the benefits for the church, obviously. The church gets money. But other than that, like, how is that serving the people? Like, where do those tax dollars go, you know, if they're not really part of the church, but they're still paying for it? I don't know. It's kind of strange.
And a lot of people and political parties would like to abolish the church tax altogether. Germany isn't the only country that has a church tax, by the way. This is also common in Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Sweden, and Austria, among others. And Austria actually didn't have a church tax at all before the Third Reich. So there, it's purely a legacy of the Nazi time. Now, the second law that still exists from the Third Reich probably comes as quite a surprise to most of you, because it doesn't really align with our overall image of Hitler and the Nazis. But one of the very first laws they passed after they came into power was about banning animal slaughter without anesthetic. And about half a year later, in November of 1933, they passed the very first nationwide animal protection law in Germany called the Reichstierschutzgesetz.
Okay, that's pretty awesome. I did watch a video on this channel a while ago that said that Hitler was a very big animal lover, which is wild to think about, how he loves animals and hates humans. Like, it's just crazy that you can love some stuff, but not humans, you know. But anyways, all right, let's continue.
The law was surrounded by a lot of propaganda, and the Nazi regime even said that it'll set an example for the whole world. Even though we should mention that the British already had a pretty comprehensive animal protection law in place for decades. In Germany, however, up until this point, animal abuse was only punishable when it happened in public and therefore disturbed other people. Now, with the new law, animal abuse was illegal even when it took place behind closed doors, and the new law also banned vivisections, so surgeries on live animals for experiments, violating the...
Yo, what? Banned surgeries on live animals for experiments, but then he wants to run experiments on freaking humans. What? This is such a crazy backwards way of thinking. Like, how can you love animals so much to do this kind of stuff and then not care about humans so much that, you know, just crazy.
The law was punished with a fine or up to 2 years in prison. But how is this possible that the Nazis, of all people, were interested in protecting animals when they clearly didn't follow the same morals in regards to all humans? Well, one factor was that animal welfare and environmentalism actually went hand in hand with the Nazis' ideology, which had a strong focus on protecting the fatherland and everything they considered part of it. They believed that the Aryan race had a particularly strong connection to nature and animals. SS chief Heinrich Himmler even said in a speech that the Germans were the only people who had an acceptable attitude towards animals. A lot of these ideas had also been supported by composer Richard Wagner in the 1800s, who the Nazis admired, and what many people don't...
Look at that cranium, dude. Oh my god. I'd like to have that head full of nickels. I could retire early.
Don't know is that, just like Wagner, Hitler was actually a vegetarian, at least in the later part of his life. He also regularly used his German Shepherd Blondie to show off his love for animals in public. So animal protection became a big propaganda topic for the Nazis to portray themselves as the ones standing up for the rights of innocent creatures. They even started giving out the Adolf Hitler medal to people and organizations who were particularly involved in animal protection. And in a radio broadcast from August of 1933, Nazi leader Hermann Göring even threatened to send people who did vivisections to a concentration camp.
Das heißt, zunächst
what? Yo, this guy's on a podcast saying this? Look at this guy.
Which is one of the very first times concentration camps were ever mentioned.
Whoa.
And the propaganda...
Dude, that's wild. So they at least threatened to send people to concentration camps to be surgically tested on if they surgically test things on animals. I mean, just... Wild logic.
That worked. Animal activists all over the world praised this new German law, and animal organizations in the US even awarded Hitler medals for his engagement. But you guessed it, the law also fulfilled another cause that aligned with the Nazi ideology. It particularly attacked the Jewish community. It made the traditional Jewish practice of kosher slaughter illegal, for example, since that's done without any anesthetic. In public statements, the Nazis made sure to portray Jewish people as inherently cruel in this context.
Oh my gosh. Never would have even thought about that. Okay.
Die überwältigende Mehrheit des deutschen Volkes hat schon lange das Töten ohne Betäubung verurteilt. Eine Praxis, die unter Juden allgemein verbreitet ist. Animal testing, too, was considered a method that was mainly supported by Jewish scientists and was against the Germanic nature. The law also attacked fur merchants, who were predominantly Jewish, and it affected the Sinti and Roma community because it banned training wild animals for their shows. But as soon as animal protection didn't serve the agenda of the Nazi regime anymore, it went right out the window. Evidence shows that the Nazis themselves conducted countless studies on cancer, smoking, reproduction, multiple sclerosis, infections, as well as studies for warfare purposes, for which they did allow unsupervised animal testing, during which hundreds of thousands of animals were injured and killed. Of course, those experiments took place in addition to the medical experiments the Nazis conducted on humans. And let's not forget that during the war, they used millions of animals for labor, most of which didn't survive. More than 2 million of the Wehrmacht's horses, donkeys, mules, oxen, and dogs were killed throughout World War II. Many of the dogs had to carry mines that exploded on them. The horses were overworked and tortured, and in 1944, when the German army was ordered to leave Crimea, they ended up shooting all 30,000 of their horses in a huge massacre to make sure that the Russians couldn't get their hands on them. Animal protection laws also didn't seem to apply when it came to the pets of Jewish people. During the November pogroms, formerly referred to as Kristallnacht, it was not only Jewish people who were attacked, but their animals too. There were reports of dogs being thrown out the window, for example. And in 1942, the Nazis even prohibited Jews from having pets altogether, and all of their remaining pets had to be brought to collection points or to a vet where they were euthanized. Everyone who has a pet can imagine how brutal of a step this was within the ongoing suppression of the Jewish community. Also, despite his supposed love for animals, Hitler strongly supported whaling and actively increased Germany's share in whaling in the Antarctic from 2% to 19% by 1937. After the end of the Nazi regime, the 1933...
Dude, whaling? In the 1930s, 1940s? Huh? What? Why?
Reichstierschutzgesetz stayed in effect all the way until 1972, when West Germany passed a new animal protection law. In 2002, animal protection was even added to the German Constitution in Article 20a, and up until now, the law has been further updated in 2013 and 2022. So no, the current animal protection law in Germany is not the exact same one that the Nazis implemented. However, our law today is a direct descendant of the Reichstierschutzgesetz, if you will, and the Nazis majorly influenced and shaped the entire animal protection movement in Germany with that law.
Wow.
The third and last law on my list for today has in fact been in place ever since the Nazis passed it in 1939, and it's the reason why to this day it's legal in Germany for people to work as a Heilpraktiker, which translates to healing practitioner or naturopath, without having any type of medical training.
What? Heilpraktiker. Heilpraktiker. What?
Or degree. In short, Heilpraktiker, or I'm just going to refer to them as healing practitioners to make it easier, are alternative and complementary healthcare professionals who treat physical and or mental health issues. Some of the most common approaches in the field are homeopathy, acupuncture, Ayurvedic medicine, faith healing.
Bro, you can do acupuncture with no training, no schooling, no degree, no certification. You could just roll up with some pin cushions and be like, yo, I'll make your headache go away. Ding, ding, ding. Start sticking people. Bro, what?
Hypnosis, and Chinese medicine, just to name a few. The profession itself has pretty much been around since the Middle Ages, but it wasn't until the 1920s that German healing practitioners started to organize themselves more and more in official associations. When the Nazis came into power shortly after, they forced all of these associations to merge into one, the Heilpraktikerbund Deutschlands, with enforced rules for membership and education. The organization also started publishing a nationwide magazine called Der Heilpraktiker. Hitler's deputy, Rudolf Hess, who was a huge supporter of Naturheilkunde, so naturopathy, even attempted to combine it with conventional medicine under the umbrella term of Deutsche Heilkunde, so German medicine or German art of healing, but he wasn't exactly successful. Instead, the Nazis actually had quite a different plan and wanted to slowly phase out the profession of healing practitioners with a new law that they passed in 1939 called the Heilpraktikergesetz. Now, while it did allow for healing practitioners who already worked in the profession to keep their license, it gave newcomers only 6 more weeks to apply for a license, after which they would only be granted in exceptional cases. And of course, it also prevented anyone who wasn't of German blood from getting a license. The law even banned any type of schools or training facilities for healing practitioners. A few years later, when West Germany was founded in 1949, this law was adopted word by word without any changes at first. Until a couple years later, in 1952, the restrictions of the law in terms of who was and wasn't allowed to practice and apply for a license were declared unconstitutional by the Bundesverfassungsgericht, so the German Supreme Court, since the West German Constitution clearly guaranteed freedom of profession. So they weren't allowed to keep newcomers who wanted to enter the profession from getting a license anymore. And without those restrictions, the law now simply said that anyone can get a license, meaning that instead of attacking the profession of healing practitioners, as the Nazis originally intended, this law now provided the legal grounds to officially legitimize the profession. Since then, all you have to do to legally work as a healing practitioner in Germany is to pass one exam. This exam is conducted by the local health offices and isn't standardized throughout Germany, which means that it can vary drastically from region to region, but once you pass it, it still allows you to work anywhere in Germany. There are also no requirements to complete any...
Okay, that is very shocking to me. Germany, the land of bureaucracy and degrees and certifications and like licenses and all this stuff. And it's just like you just go and you take one test and you can just practice medicine like just like that. Crazy to me.
Any kind of formal training before taking this exam. All you need to sign up for it is a qualifizierter Hauptschulabschluss, which is basically a 9th grade high school diploma, and you have to be at least 25 years old. Plus, the exam itself is officially called a Unbedenklichkeitsprüfung. So it's simply supposed to reassure that the person won't cause any harm to the public. It's not supposed to test if they're actually qualified for the job or if they have the necessary skills. Now, even though the law has been updated a few times since 1939, the main part of it is still in place to this day, which puts Germany in a pretty unique position because in most other countries in the EU and the world, this profession is either completely banned or heavily regulated. Meanwhile, in Germany, it's the only healthcare profession that doesn't require any type of formal training. Now, personally, I'm not saying that healing practitioners should disappear in Germany altogether, because they do help a lot of people, especially those who go there in addition to receiving conventional treatments. But it's important to note that the lack of training can get dangerous, especially when people solely rely on alternative treatments or when healing practitioners administer medications without having the proper training. Just to give you one example, in 2016, a healing practitioner in North Rhine-Westphalia killed 3 cancer patients when he accidentally overdosed them on a substance because he didn't have the proper measuring devices. Okay, we ended on a pretty grim note there, but what other German laws do you know that are remnants from the Nazi regime?
I don't know, dude. Anyways, wow, that was a wild ride. Oh man, I would not have expected that last law. Being able to practice medicine without any formal training or anything, like, that's just wild to me. But I'm curious, as always, what you guys, the experts, have to say. You are the Germans after all. So what do you think? Let me know your thoughts. Leave your mustard down in the comment section below. That's all the time that I have for today, though. So thank you guys so much for being here, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.